What's up, fantasy fans? So today I'm going to bring you a list of my top 15 favorite fantasy stories in prose. I think I want to do a separate list for like top 15 comics, top 15 manga. So this is specifically fantasy fiction prose, and at my number 15 spot is a book I haven't even finished yet, and it is actually what prompted me to start this video, because I realized I have a brand new favorite, and this will probably be in my top 5 of all time. Right now my number 15 is Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer.
The world makes of us what it will, and it doesn't give a damn about what we want. If we're lucky, we'll look back from our deathbeds and find that our lives were lived for a purpose. But more often than not, all we'll see is a long list of missed opportunities. Think about all that the wind is and all that it does, where it goes, where it comes from. The wind knows everything, for it travels everywhere and it's with us always. It endures, it feels, it speaks. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it rages. Give it a listen sometime.
Absolutely blew me away, this book. I'm still only about halfway through, but the relationship here between our two main protagonists, Marcus and Aram, reminded me so much of Locke and Jean, so much of Fitz and the Fool. It has an autistic main character, but it doesn't feel gimmicky. It feels very genuine in the way the author approaches this character. M.L. Spencer is a genius prose writer. It really felt like if Robin Hobb wrote Bound and the Broken. For my number 14 spot, I'm going to go with the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. Book 1, Gideon the Ninth. Book 2, Harrow the Ninth. And Book 3, Nona the Ninth.
And instead you rolled a rock over me and turned your back. I spent all that time drowning and surfacing in you over and over and over. And all because in the end you could not bear to do the one thing I asked you to do. I wanted you to use me, you malign, double-crossing, corpse-obsessed bag of bones. You broken, used-up shithead. I wanted you to live and not die, you imaginary girlfriend-having asshole. Fuck one flesh, one end. Harrow, I already gave my flesh to you, and I already gave you my end. I gave you my sword, I gave you myself. I did it while knowing I'd do it all again, without hesitation, because all I ever wanted you to do was eat me.
This is an amazing series about lesbian necromancers in space, is kind of like the name it's been given, but you actually get something a lot more, a lot deeper than that premise may sound. You get thought-provoking explorations on identity. You get a very dense series full of mystery, full of thrills and lore, and it is an absolute joy to read. It's one of my favorite sci-fi series of all time. And yeah, Locked Tomb, Tamsin Muir, it's amazing. All right, for my number 13, I'm going to have a series that I do not have a physical copy of, but it is not the First Law trilogy, but the greater First Law universe.
Evil turned out not to be a grand thing. Not sneering emperors with their world-conquering designs, not cackling demons plotting in the darkness beyond the world. It was small men with their small acts and their small reasons. It was selfishness and carelessness and waste. It was bad luck, incompetence, and stupidity. It was violence divorced from conscience or consequence. It was high ideals even, and low methods.
To include the First Law trilogy, the Great Leveler standalone trilogy, and the Age of Madness, which in my opinion is Joe Abercrombie's best work. I love King Orso, Prince Orso. Orso is my favorite character that Abercrombie's ever made. I know that is very abnormal for First Law fans, but I absolutely loved Orso and Savine and Ricka. I thought his character work only got better and better. The First Law universe by Joe Abercrombie is my number 13 pick. All right, so for my number 12 pick, I'm going to go with the Five Warrior Angels series by Brian Lee Durfee. Book 1, The Forgetting Moon. Book 2, and my personal favorite, The Blackest Heart. And Book 3, Lonesome Crown.
War is destruction. War is death. But once war is over, royals will again sit their broken thrones. Villagers will return to their burnt villages. Daughters will bury their fathers, and humanity will carry on and rebuild. Hope will flourish. The dead will sleep. Life goes on for the living. Just remember that when all hope seems lost. The chivalric illuminations of Rael.
If you took Tolkien and combined him with Abercrombie, you would get Brian Lee Durfee's writing style. It has, the First Law level, witty, almost sardonic dialogue with the more classical fantasy vibes of a Tolkien. In fact, in the first 5 chapters of Forgetting Moon, it will very much feel like a classical fantasy story and less of a grimdark story. Trust me, Once you get to like chapter 6 and 7, it will show you exactly what type of story it is. It is definitely grimdark, as grimdark as it gets, and I absolutely loved it. All right, so my number 11 series is kind of a cheat, and it is going to be the Taproot Verse by Mark Lawrence.
I'll tell you now that silence almost beat me. It's the silence that scares me. It's the blank page on which I can write my own fears. The spirits of the dead have nothing on it. The dead one tried to show me hell, but it was a pale imitation of the horror I can paint on the darkness in a quiet moment. All the world and more has rushed eternity's length to reach this beat of your heart, screaming down the years, and if you let it, the universe, without drawing breath, will press itself through this fractured second and race to the next, on into a new eternity. Everything that is, the echoes of everything that ever was, the roots of all that will ever be, must pass through this moment that you own. Your only task is to give it pause, to make it notice.
This includes his Broken Empire trilogy. Here's a collection of short stories, Road Brothers, from that universe. The Red Queen's War trilogy. It also includes the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, again, a collection of short stories, the Book of the Ice, the Impossible Times, and potentially the Library trilogy. He's kind of doing a Michael Moorcock that started the whole multiverse movement. You see it with Brandon Sanderson, though his is a little bit tighter. You see it with Michael R. Fletcher, and you see it with Mark Lawrence. And the Taproot verse is one of my all-time favorite multiverse universe type stories. All right, so my number 10 is again going to be a cheat. And speaking of Sanderson and how his universe is more connected, I gotta go with the Cosmere as my number 10 favorite series of all time.
And so, does the destination matter, or is it the path we take? I declare that no accomplishment has substance nearly as great as the road used to achieve it. We are not creatures of destinations. It is the journey that shapes us, our calloused feet, our backs strong from carrying the weight of our travels, our eyes open with the fresh delight of experiences lived. Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. You cannot have my pain, Dalinar. Dalinar forced himself to his feet. You cannot have my pain. Be sensible, I killed those children, Dalinar said. No, I burned the people of Rathalos. I was there influencing you. You cannot have my pain, Dalinar bellowed, stepping toward Odium. The god frowned, his fused companions shied back, and Amaram raised a hand before his eyes and squinted. Were those glory sprints spinning around Dalinar? I did kill the people of Rathalos, Dalinar shouted. You might have been there, but I made the choice. I decided. I killed her. It hurt so much, but I did it. I accept that. You cannot have her. You cannot take her from me again. Dalinar, Odium said. What do you hope to gain keeping this burden? Dalinar sneered at the god. If I pretend I didn't do those things, it means that I can't have grown to become someone else. A failure? Something stirred inside of Dalinar, a warmth he had known once before, a warm, calming light. Unite them. Journey before destination, Dalinar said. It cannot be a journey if it doesn't have a beginning. A thunderclap sounded in his mind. Suddenly, awareness poured back into him. The Stormfather, distant, feeling frightened but also surprised. Dalinar, I will take responsibility for what I have done, Dalinar whispered. If I must fall, I will rise each time a better man.
It is a beautiful series, and it is a lot more connected than most universe fantasy series. In especially lately, Sanderson has been making strides in how to construct a well-built universe, not just a world, but a well-built universe. And I think while there are some fumbles along the way, it's not a perfect universe. I think that Sanderson is paving the way for what sci fantasy could become. And I have complete faith that with time he will only climb higher and higher on this list. I'm a very prose first reader. I love great prose and great dialogue. That is not Sanderson's strong point, though he has made tremendous strides in that area. For him to be my number 10 when those are things I value more than anything just shows how amazing his world building is, how exemplary his character development is, and just how awesome of an author he is, and his prose and dialogue get better with each subsequent release. In fact, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter has my favorite prose of his ever. Trust of the Emerald Sea was also great. So for my number 9 pick, this is going to seem kind of crazy because there's only one book out. Kind of as crazy as having Dragon Mage as my number 15 when I haven't even finished it. But number 1 is going to be The 12th World, or Dreams of the Dying by Nicholas Lietzau.
People were so quick to point out all the inspiring stories of catharsis, completely ignoring the fact that the vast majority of broken never beat their demons, that the drunkard son stayed with the bottle, the war widow never conquered her loneliness, and the defiled child never wiped that imagined black stain from their soul. Because in a world that worshipped the victorious, who the hell wanted to hear about the defeated?
This was originally part of the Enderal trilogy, and I believe now it's going to be the 12th World tetralogy, but it was inspired by the video game Enderal, and to my understanding, that was a mod of the video game Skyrim, and because he was using assets from a mod that was itself using assets from Skyrim, even though none of the world building elements and none of the actual important aspects of his book were derived in any way from Elder Scrolls lore, Bethesda started a lawsuit and he had to change a lot of the names and stuff. But I actually think this is a good thing because he's no longer constrained to building that prequel trilogy up to a where the game is. Instead, Jespar can really shine as his own character, because I believe Jespar was like the main companion character of the protagonist that you play as in the Enderal game. So now I feel like Jespar could just go on, and I definitely think 12th World, if The Cure for Living, which is supposed to come out either later this year or beginning 2026, if it's even half as good as Dreams of the Dying, then this will stay on the list. It is an absolute joy to read and one of my favorite self-published books of all time. Speaking of self-published books, my number 8 pick is going to be The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong.
You are my story, and I was so selfish, so tied to that shadow that I missed it. And my son, I'm so sorry it took me this long to understand. I'm sorry. The words caught in her throat, choking her until pain shot through her chest, forcing her to let them out. I never loved you the way I should have.
Absolute masterpiece of a book. I know there are flaws. I know it built up the Threnody trilogy that M.L. Wong is basically discontinued. I know that it definitely set up some things that maybe if she were to go back and rewrite it, she might not include those tidbits. It is a flawed masterpiece. And there are books that I think are flawless. They don't match Sword of Kaigen, because even though Sword of Kaigen is flawed, the highest highs of Sword of Kaigen beat out the highest highs of most books you will ever read, and it is my favorite standalone book in a fantasy world that I have ever read. Dragon Mage might be competing with it soon. Dragon Mage, Sword of Kaigen, and Dreams of the Dying, to me, are the 3 best self-published fantasy books I have ever read. Way of Edan's like a number 4. I really love it, but I think I'm too early in that trilogy to put it on this list. All right, and at my number 7 spot, we have the award for the series most likely to change places by the time I do this list again, and that is The Wars of Light and Shadow.
Because the factual account lay hopelessly entangled between legend and theology, sages in the 7th Age meditated upon the ancient past and recalled through visions the events as they happened. Contrary to all expectation, the conflict did not begin on the council stair of Eterra, nor on the soil of Aethera itself. Instead, the vision started upon the wide oceans of the splinter world Desen-Elur. This is the chronicle the sages recovered. Let each who reads determine the good and the evil for himself.
And I have a feeling this might rise up to be number 3 overall. I definitely think she has the potential to be 3rd, 2nd, or even 1st place in my favorite series of all time list. The fact that I'm 1 book into an 11-book series and like 4 short stories and a novella, and I am ranking her above people that have been my favorites for 5-6 years, just tells you how masterful of a writer she is. Speaking of masterful writers that really just create a captivating world, and also, like Janny, kind of has a classical element while still making it very much his own thing, I have to go with The Lawn World, or the different series by Michael J. Sullivan. All of his books, aside from Hollow World, all occur within the same world, and that is Elan.
I am officially turning him over to you. He's your problem now. You'll have to watch out for him, and it won't be easy. He's naive, gullible, immature, horribly unsophisticated, ignorant about anything worth knowing, and idealistic to a fault. He paused to make a show of thinking harder. He's also indecisive, pathetically honest, a horrible liar, and too virtuous for words. He gets up twice each night to relieve himself, wads his clothes rather than folds them, chews with his mouth open, and talks with his mouth full. He has a nasty habit of cracking his knuckles every morning at breakfast, and, of course, he snores. To remedy that, just put a rock under his blanket. Happiness is merely a state when everything is as it should be. But if everything is always perfect, there is no challenge, no reason to live, no purpose to exist. Happiness is the reward for struggle, and without struggle, there can be no growth.
There's the Rhaenyra Revelations, the Rhaenyra Chronicles, which is a prequel 10 years before Revelations. There's the Legends of the First Empire, thousands of years before, and then Rise and Fall, which bridges the gap between those two series. He's recently announced that he's doing After the Fall, which is a trilogy of books that he will write with other lesser-known authors. Each book will have a different co-author, and it'll be up-and-coming authors. I have no doubt that Michael J. Sullivan will make sure that their writing is edited to the quality we've seen with Elon. And then he is finishing up with The Cycle, which is supposed to be a sequel of everything that came before. And if The Cycle lands, I definitely think that this will catapult into my top 5 and potentially top 3. So him and Janny are both competing. All right, my number 5, which a lot of people might contest, that, I see this series a lot, is termed as like the action sci-fi series, and people don't think it's that deep. I completely disagree. I think this is an amazing series, and my number 5 pick is The Red Rising Saga by Pierce Brown.
They pushed and pushed for so long. They knew I was something dangerous, something different. Sooner or later, they had to know I would snap and come to cut them down. Or perhaps they think I'm still a child. The fools. Alexander was a child when he ruined his first nation. The path is made of many stones that look all the same. When you trod upon evil, you do not rest or look down, because goodness is only a step away. The next may bring ruin, the next joy. But these stones are not your destination. They are but your journey to the path's end.
I absolutely adore Red Rising. I adore Cassius, Severo, Victra, Darrow, Lyria, Volga. I mean, there's very few series where I can think of that many, Ephraim, that many characters that I would, oh my gosh, Ragnar Valaris. There's so many, Sephi the Quiet. There's so many amazing characters in that series. And it also has the most hated, the most despicable villain I have ever read in my entire life. I hate him more than Joffrey, and I can't spoil who it is because you don't really find out how despicable he is until like the latest book that released. And Red Rising, Pierce Brown, to me, I know a lot of people say they love Sun Eater, and I loved book 1 of Sun Eater. Sun Eater will definitely be in my top 15 of all time if it keeps up the quality. I know it feels like everyone ranks it above Red Rising. I think Red Rising is here to stay. I think it's my sci-fi series that, it really got me into sci-fi. If it weren't for Red Rising, I don't think I would have given Sun Eater a chance. Red Rising, really, Mike and Petrick mentioned that book, and I gave it a chance, and it was just the perfect book for me. I absolutely adored it. So my number 4 pick, and I may lose all validation here for putting it this low, but keep in mind, this is number 4. This beat Red Rising, which is one of my favorite things ever. But number 4, not number 1, I'm sorry. Number 4 has to go to the Middle Earth, the Greater Middle Earth series, to include Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Children of Hurin. I don't really know if I'd include Beren and Luthien in The Fall of Gondolin, because that's really more of like a short story with a collection of notes involved, and there's never like a real concrete canon version of it, but it still is an event that exists in the world. Anyway, the Middle Earth mythos is my number 4 pick.
It's a dangerous business, Frodo. Going out your door, you step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
We would not have the fantasy genre if it were not for Aragorn, Gandalf, Merry, Sam, Pippin, Frodo. I mean, every single character in the Fellowship, aside from Legolas, to me, has withstood the test of time. And I mean, there's so many quotes. Not all who wander are lost. Even the smallest people can change the course of the world. It's wise, it's brilliant, and without it, my top 3 probably would not exist. So this number 3 was my favorite series for like a decade. It was my favorite. Absolutely loved it. It was the series that really got me back into fantasy after I got a little burnt out by Kingkiller not finishing, George R. R. Martin not finishing. It is not a coincidence that those two are not on this list. Those are both brilliant authors, but I'm only so patient. And this author kind of falls into that trapping as well, as book 4 will probably never come out, but his books do feel more standalone than the two authors I just mentioned. And I'm talking about The Gentleman Bastard sequence by Scott Lynch.
See, I've got kids that enjoy stealing, I've got kids that don't think about stealing one way or the other, and I've got kids that just tolerate stealing because they know they've got nothing else to do. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever been hungry for it like this boy. If he had a bloody gash across his throat and a physico was trying to sew it up, Lamore would steal the needle and thread and die laughing. He steals too much. Someday, Locke Lamora, he said, someday you're going to fuck up so magnificently, so ambitiously, so overwhelmingly that the skies will light up and the moons will spin and the gods themselves will shit comets with glee, and I just hope I'm still around to see it. Oh, please, said Locke. It'll never happen.
The story of Locke and Jean is just one of those that I guess I just read it at the right time in my life, and I really don't think another bromance aside from what I'm about to get into will ever match the amount of emotions that could be that The Gentleman Bastards brought out of me. You know, they're like, whenever I read other books, like I read Darrow and Severo and Red Rising, I'm thinking, oh, this reminds me of Locke and Jean. Like, it has transcended Sam and Frodo for like, this is the go-to best male friendship I ever think of. And I think it is so brilliant, and it is such an amazing series. I hate that we're never going to get an ending, but I mean, we may get an ending. I think Scott Lynch is more likely than Martin or Rothfuss to write to finish his series one day. But even if we don't get an ending, the 3 books we got were amazing. I know some people are lukewarm on Republic of Thieves. I thought Republic of Thieves was a 5-star. I thought every single book in that series was an absolute 10 out of 10 masterpiece, and I could not rank this series higher. It is just one of my all-time greats. Now we're getting into top 2. These two, okay, so the way my list goes is like 15 to 6 are like pretty set, right? 5 and 4, like, except for the few I mentioned, like Janny Words and Dragon Mage and, the 12th World, some of them could be fluid because I haven't read enough and there's not enough out. But, my number 5 and my number 4 are like where you get into the stuff that I am like obsessed with. Like, I think about this stuff every single day. Number 3, you get into what was my favorite for a decade. But these top 2, oh man. These top 2 to me are the pinnacle of fantasy, and I do think that they surpass Tolkien. 3 might be nostalgia for me. Gentleman Bastards might be nostalgia for me. These top 2, I truly, genuinely believe that these people are better writers than Martin and Tolkien, and that is completely subjective, but I just think for my qualities that I want in fiction, these are the 2 greatest authors of all time. And my number 2 is this woman should not be on anyone's number 2 spot, but she had to go somewhere, and it is going to be Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings.
Tomorrow owes you the sum of your yesterdays. No more than that, and no less. Everyone thinks that courage is about facing death without flinching, but almost anyone can do that. Almost anyone can hold their breath and not scream for as long as it takes to die. True courage is about facing life without flinching. I don't mean the times when the right path is hard but glorious at the end. I'm talking about enduring the boredom, the messiness, and the inconvenience of doing what is right.
When I tell you Fitz Chivalry Farseer is my absolute favorite fictional character, not just in fantasy, not just in the written word, like this is including comics, this is including manga, this is including literary fiction, commercial fiction, this is including movies. This is like, Fitz Chivalry Farseer is my favorite fictional character of all time. And I don't think that will ever be displaced. I really love Arathon in Wars of Light and Shadow. I think he's going to be, on the tier list for favorite characters of all time. I don't think anyone's ever going to beat Fitz Chivalry Farseer. I have a tattoo of the Fool on my neck. I absolutely adore that series. Night Eyes, Fitz, the Fool, Malta, Althea, Wintro. I mean, there's Rain. There's so many characters. Oh, Ketrican. There's so many characters in that series. B. There's so many characters in that series that just feels realer to me than people I've known. And it really pains me to put this at a number 2 spot, but it is the second best piece of fiction I have ever in my life experienced. And Robin Hobb may be my favorite author of all time. I say that all the time. Robin Hobb is my favorite author of all time, but she's really tied with, in my number 1 favorite series of all time, is Malazan Book of the Fallen.
There is something profoundly cynical, my friends, in the notion of paradise after death. The lure is evasion, the promise is excusative. One need not accept responsibility for the world as it is, and by extension, one need not do anything about it. To strive for change, for true goodness in this mortal world, one must acknowledge and accept within one's own soul that this mortal reality has purpose in itself, that its greatest value is not for us, but for our children and their children. To view life as but a quick passage along a foul, tortured path, made foul and tortured by our own indifference, is to excuse all manner of misery and depravity, and to exact cruel punishment upon the innocent lives to come. I defy this notion of paradise beyond the gates of bone. If the soul truly survives the passage, then it behooves us, each of us, my friends, to nurture a faith in similitude. What awaits us is a reflection of what we leave behind, and in the squandering of our mortal existence, we surrender the opportunity to learn the ways of goodness, the practice of sympathy, empathy, compassion, and healing, all pass by in our rush to arrive at a place of glory and beauty, a place we did not earn and most certainly do not deserve.
If you knew me at all, you knew it was going to be Malazan Book of the Fallen. I've only read it once. I'm not one of those people that's read it a million times, but when I say that this series had a profound impact on who I am as a person, on my political leanings, my spiritual leanings, it radically, I grew up in the Deep South. So a lot of the opinions that I had growing up are not what I would find ethically correct now. In Malazan, it was partly moving out of that environment and partly reading this amazing series by genius author Steven Erikson that really opened my eyes to the suffering of others and really made me a more empathetic and more ethical human being. Not to say that I was like a terrible person before. I really don't think I was, but it just made me more thoughtful of the struggles of others. And, the social commentary, themes of compassion, the character of Fiddler. I said Fitz was my favorite character of all time. Fiddler is my second favorite character of all time. How could that be for a character whose real name I don't even know? Absolutely love Fiddler. To me, he stands for the passion, the compassion, the selfless nature of humanity that we should all aspire to. And in this series where we have gods and descendants and these crazy powerful beings, the one I want to be the most like is just a simple human soldier. And I think Fiddler is one of the best characters of all time. I have a tattoo of him on my neck. I keep forgetting which side's the fool and which side's Fiddler. But yeah, so takeaway, these are 15 of my favorite books of all time. Number 15 I am currently reading, and it's the one that sparked my want to make this video because I do not think Dragon Mage gets nearly enough credit as it deserves. I think it's one of the best books I've ever read, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it. Robin Hobb writing Bound and the Broken. It's amazing. But yeah, so here are my 15 favorite books of all time. They're there's some are a bit fluid, some are a bit more set. My top 2, I feel like will probably stay my top 2 until the day I die. I really just haven't seen an author that captivates me the way Robin Hobb and Steven Erikson have. And I do think that is partially on me. I came across those authors at the point in my maturation and the point of my growth where they could have meant the most to me. And, maybe there will be more phases in my life. I'm still young. There could be phases in my life where I find the perfect author for the perfect phase in life. Like, I'm really finding that manga-wise, One Piece is, I've basically, the beginning of my life was very difficult, and I've been getting into this, better time in my life. And One Piece has given me an organic outlet to kind of feel that joy and feel that happiness and feel that wonder that maybe I wasn't able to experience in my youth because of hardships. And now that I've reached a point of both financial and personal freedom and spiritual freedom and all that, I just feel just really at peace with who I am. And One Piece has been, one of those stories that has hit me just right at the exact right time. Please let me know, based off these readings, what I should read next, based off of what I like. I know. I need to read John Gwen. I love Ed and Will. I love their channel. I know I'm going to love their Papa's books. I definitely need to read that. Wheel of Time is not on this list. I do not like Wheel of Time. I'm sorry. I read all 14 books. Didn't like it. And then, my stance on Martin and Rothfuss. So yeah, I think the biggest gap in my, bibliography, my library, my biggest gap prose wise, fantasy prose, is John Gwynne and Jay Kristoff. So I definitely want to fix that in the coming year. Peace.